Welcome, I'm Tim. We've met before. This is 172 hand bending. In this video, you've already seen in the previous video the company show you how to use the benders, the extra tools and stuff like this for conduit bending. In this little exercise, I am going to show you exactly what you're going to do in your lab, so that if you have any problems understanding what was told to you by the video prior to this, we're going to help solve that problem. Due to the expense of the electrical conduit, we want to try to ensure that the student understands exactly what he or she is expected to do prior to coming out here and bending the conduit. Now, you may be confused a little bit, or you may have some background knowledge of how to do bending conduit. That's great. If you know how to bend conduit and you can do it, that's outstanding. This is really basic bending conduit. We're not concerned about all the formulas that are involved in this yet. All we're trying to do is get you to understand how to use the tool, the parts of the tool, and do simple bends. Now in this video, you're going to do a 90-degree bend, you're going to do a saddle bend, and an offset bend. Those three bends you're going to perform today during the exercise. Like any job, you know, time and money is everything. If I'm your boss and I can't depend on you to know how to use the equipment and get the best product for the cheapest amount of money, I'm going to get hurt in the long run, which is going to hurt you in the long run, because I'm not going to have you wasting anywhere from $5 to $10 a stick of conduit because you can't figure out how to use the tool. So please pay attention if you are getting into the electrical field, because you will do this day in and day out. As you perform it, you will catch on to all the little tricks of the trade. And we're not here to show you all those tricks of the trade. We're here to show you how to use the equipment properly. So understand that we're trying to keep this really simple right now. If you're moving on to 173, you're going to not only do this phase of it again, but you're also going to be working with 3/4 inch. And they're basically all the same rules. You need to know how to use the tool correctly. So that's what this is all about today. So please pay attention. Now, you're using your electrical 172 textbook right now. Now, depending on the print, it may be in different sections of the book, but this is what you should be looking for. Hand bending, and it may be under this number or it may be a new number, but this is the area that we're going to be working with. Now, what I'd like you to do is turn to wherever it is in the book that discusses how to bend a 90-degree stub up, they call it. All right. Now we're going to discuss this, and remember, I'm only trying to show you how to use the tool as well as a little bit of the tables. We are not concerned about shrinkage at this point. All right. That will come play into another part of the exercise in 173. So let's discuss some safety aspects here. Got to have your glasses, your gloves, a tape measure, your black pen, and if you don't have one, come see us. We have this for you. Your tape measure and all the tools and material are in the tool crib. If for some reason there isn't enough material in the tool crib, locate myself or notify one of the instructors and we'll get you the equipment. Remember, we want to give you the best quality of education possible, and to do that, we need your help. So when you go to do something, you'll mark it out, you'll have one of the staff check it prior to bending it. That just saves on accidents, and if you have questions, we want you to ask them at that point. Now, as the prior video explains, it talks about the hand bender, okay? Now this one is the 1/2 inch hand bender. And if you look on your, typically Ideal is the company that makes this hand benders. I don't know if there's other companies out there that do that, but we use Ideal. You'll find Ideal almost in every home store or electrical shop. But it's always stamped on there the size, and it'll say EMT. Now remember, EMT, electrical metal tubing, is different than if they say RMC or IMC or whatever. So you can't use this on other type of material. And in this case, it's a 1/2 inch. Now, let's talk about the tool itself. You notice that there's like a heel here, all right? This is where your pipe is going to come through. Now, it can come through either direction. It doesn't really matter. And there are shortcuts, and you'll see what happens. Then you have your arrowhead. This arrowhead has to be on your line that you've marked on your conduit, except for certain specific operations. Then as you look back here, you'll see we're back of 90, all right? You see this little indentation, all right? That's for back-to-back 90s. Or when you go and do your 90-degree angle, if you stop somewhere around there, you'll notice, and we'll show you, it'll give you a 90-degree angle. The star, all right? We're not getting involved in the star right at this present moment. Then you have all your typical degrees up to the 90, which is when you laying it flat on the surface, and you'll see this in a minute. Important factor is when you're talking about these degrees, you don't bend your conduit to the degree line, you bend it parallel to the degree line, just as they explained that in the last video to you. If you go too far, then you've tweaked it out of whack, and you may need to have to move it back. And once you bend an EMT, there's no turning back, all right? It's going to have a kink in it of some sort, and that's the last thing you want. That is not acceptable, all right? Because when you're pulling wire through EMT, if it isn't a smooth run, you're going to really have a problem. And if you've never done it before, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Now, in your book, they talk about 5 inches and 6 inches of take-up. On 1/2 inch conduit, there's normally what is called a 5 inch take-up. On 3/4 inch, there's typically a 6 inch take-up. That's mathematically figured out for you, and we're not going to go all into that trigonometry and try to figure out why that is at this point in the game. Just understand that you're going to have a 5 inch on 1/2 inch take up and a 6 inch take up on 3/4 inch. So knowing your tool is one of the important factors here, because if you don't understand how to use the tool, you're not going to get the bends that you need. So we here at the college want to start off in, as I've explained in other classes and CDs and videos, it is simply a walk or crawl, walk, run method. So right now we're at the crawling stage. This is designed for people who have never done this before, so please be patient with me. In your book, it asks for I think it is a 12 inch, or in the book, it asks for an 18 inch stub up. Well, because of cost of materials and everything, we're only doing a 12 or 13 inch stub up, depending on which exercise you have in your notebook. please read the instructions prior to doing anything. So all I really need right now is my tape measure and my black pen. Because of the black pens, they don't make everything real high-tech anymore. When you're finished with it, cover it up because it dries out pretty quick, please. All right, now, what you want to do is you want to inspect your conduit. Be sure it doesn't have any bends, all right? Don't try to use something to try to get away with doing it cheaper. Get a nice straight piece, because you either do it right now or you're going to end up doing it again later on down the road. Now, remember, we're going to do a 12-inch stub up. So simply to do this is you put the end of your tape measure out, the cutoff end of your EMT, go out and find 12 inches. Now, this would be the shortcut, all right, that I was talking about earlier, just putting a line there. But what I suggest to do all the time is rotate that around 360 degrees so that you have a perfectly round line to keep track of. But now remember, we were talking about the 5-inch take-up. Well, what you have to do then is come down and subtract 5 inches from your work. This is that 5-inch take-up that we were talking about. And on 3/4, it will be 6 inches. Again, walk it all the way around in the circle. Get the 360 degrees mark. Now, this line here, the first line we put on, that's when it finishes up. It will be approximately 12 inches. This is where I'm going to put my bender, because when I bend this up, remember that 5-inch take up? Well, that's added into it. So when you get from here to the top of your bend, it should be 12 inches. All right. Now, the other thing is safety. Sometimes you'll be in this classroom and there'll be a lot of people walking around here. So always concentrate on the safety factor here. You can't be swinging this tool all over the place and not be thinking about your students, all right? Because somebody will be walking by you, all right, and you hit them with this, it's going to leave a mark, trust me, okay? So the other factor is this comes in 10-foot lengths. EMT typically comes in 10-foot lengths. You may not get a 10-foot length, just depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But for intensive purposes, it comes in 10-foot lengths. And that's a lot of things that can go wrong here, you know? You can be hitting things left and right if you're not paying attention. And again, you know, discipline is everything. If you're not paying attention, you're a hazard on my workspace, all right? And I will stop you in a heartbeat, all right? I want you to enjoy the course, but I need to think of safety first. So now we got all that preliminary stuff out of the way, let's play with the tool. Now there's several ways of doing this. You can lay this flat on the ground and put your mark and your tool on there and work it up that way. That's a terrific way of doing it, and that's the way we're going to do it. Or if you wish, you could stand it up on its heel, all right, as such, and you can bend it that way. Depends on what you feel comfortable about. Beginners, I would suspect that you want to start on the floor. It's a little bit easier to work with. The other thing is always try to keep this tool parallel and even with your work. Don't have it tilted one way or the other, because that's how that tool or the bend is going to come out. And if that comes out like that, it's worthless. So take your time. Here is a little shortcut that one student showed me one time. You'll notice that there is writing on this conduit. Some come in a line. It's very faint, but you can see it. Some have a dark line going down it. Some have wording, and in this case, we're very fortunate, it has both. What you want to do is you want to keep that parallel to the floor And that's a guide to be sure that you're doing what you want at the right angle that you're doing it at. And as you practice this, it'll become much easier. All right, so let's play with this. We get our tool. Now, the big thing about bending conduit is always, once you start, stop and think what your next move is before you go do it. You only have one shot at this. So just don't freak, just pay attention to what you're doing. All right, so please be sure you have your glasses and your gloves on. Because if this slips, you're going to be the first one to know it. And it has a tendency of slipping. So we're going to put this on the floor. Okay, now remember I said that you could put this on the ground. And remember our arrowhead. That arrowhead in this case is going right up against our second line. All right, not back here, because when you go to bend it, it will be 5 inches higher than what it's supposed to be. Again, cost of materials. Sure, you could fix that problem by cutting 5 inches off. But if you're doing that over and over again, you're wasting time and you're wasting my money. So what you want to do is you want to tilt your tool forward a little bit and slide the pipe into it very gently. And it takes a little bit of practice trying to maneuver this so that it comes out right. Okay, so you see that I'm going to take my glove off so you can see a little bit better. But there's my arrowhead and there's my black line. I'm parallel to the tool. Now I want to be sure that everything is aligned up. Now, for me, because of my strength, I don't have to worry too much about this. But the best way to do this is using your brains and not your brawn. All right? So what you want to do is you want to keep this, you can see how easy it is to turn this left or right and then make your bend. Well, once you move, you got to be sure that you keep a little pressure on this. You don't have to bend it, just keep a little pressure, otherwise the bar is going to move on you. You notice that I'm a right-hander, so my left foot is kind of holding the bar in place, or the tubing. This is a foot peg. Now, you want to turn it sideways because it's awkward for most people to do it this way. Turn it sideways, and you're going to use your body because your legs have a lot more strength. And you'll notice that you don't need a lot of upper strength. For those that are doing this, it's a benefit. Now, I'm going to tell you that the thicker material that you go up, i.e. using a hickey or 3/4 inch or 1 inch conduit, it can be very tough. You will sweat, especially if you have to do this all day long. So you want a good grip of the handle. You want to stay steady. You want to be sure that your line is in parallel with everything. And you want to gradually and gently pull back, step down on the leg, and keep moving it. And you're going to notice that this heel back here is going to bottom out on that tubing. Now when it bottoms out, that's the 90-degree angle. Now I have what I think is a 90-degree angle, or perfect. All I have to do is release off the pressure on the handle and slide it straight up. Therefore, now I have a 12-inch rise or a 12-inch bend. Stub up, they call it. All right, now they may have some other technical names out there, but the bottom line is it's a 90-degree bend, and they refer to this to a stub up. Now, typically, depending on, I mean, we can go into scenarios all day long. Let's say that my subfloor was here, and this was coming up through the subfloor, and I wanted it so many inches up off my floor. That's a possibility. Or I just wanted it up off the ground and up against the wall. Well, that's a possibility. So understand this is the basic 90-degree or stub up, and this is what you're going to perform. Now you can take your tape measure and measure, and you'll notice I'm pretty close. All right, we're talking 1/8 of an inch off. All right, that is your typical 90. Now, once you're done, set that down, secure your tools, and now you're going to move over and cut this off. Again, keeping track of the safety factor of people around you at all times. What we want you to do for saving material is cutting it off as close as you can before the bend starts. Then just set that off to the side. For some people, when you're putting this in the vise, pay attention to what's going on around you. If there's students here at the brazing table, you can't do that. We do have one outside, same type of vise. Use that and be sure that nobody's within the area. But you'll also notice this is called a pipe vise. All right? The pipe vise is because inside here there are brackets that will hold your pipe. The bottom one is typically for 1/2 inch, 3/4 on the top, but you never put round stock onto a flat surface. It isn't going to hold. So you tighten that up. You don't have to, squish it or anything. Now you can get your hacksaw and remove that if there's no one here in the brazing table, or you can go over to the tool crib and there's several other ones. Just check to be sure that the blade is tight and that the teeth are facing forward. Now remember, I want you to try to cut as close to the end of the bend as possible. Remember, pull back, start your saw curve, and then just move forward. Equal pressure on it. Do not force it. Cut all the way through, put your blade away, and then this is what you should end up with. So now there's something that you also need to know. More electrical problems are caused because people that are doing this type of work are either lazy, uneducated, or they just don't care. Bending conduit is pretty scientific when you get really into it and doing a lot of different bends. A lot of math is involved, but it's easy math. Don't freak when you hear the word math. It's just a system that you have to learn, and it isn't that complicated. If I can learn it, anybody can learn it. Now, whenever you cut EMT or any type of pipe, you always have to do what is known as reaming. Now, most electricians have the pair of needle nose pliers. It's the quickest and the easiest way to do this. Put it in the one end that you cut, or in most cases, both ends that are on your tubing, and you just want to force it in a little bit and rotate it around. Remember, EMT is very soft. But what you want to try to do is you want to try to remove any type of burrs that might be in here. The reason being is, as you put this together, you're going to end up pulling wiring through this. If there are any sharp edges on this, that sharp edges is going to cut the installation of that wire. Now, I'm going to tell you that when you go do this, if you don't do it right and you put it all together and you go pull 400 feet of wire through there and you get a direct short on your wire, you could pretty well bet that somebody's going to lose their job and it ain't going to be the boss. All right? The other thing is, remember, the end that I did cut, I want to do the same thing. Take a second or two and do it right. There's no reason to be in a rush. And you can see what I've done, it's polished up. The other trick is you either use these, the needle nose, or your channel locks, and you get the outside done. All right, and just kind of run it around and get all the burrs off of it. All right. So therefore, when you put your coupling together to continue your work on your piping, it's all connected, and you know that when you go to pull that wire, it's a smooth run. All right, there's no burrs, there's nothing in there that's going to cut that insulation. You feel the insulation of wire, and you're going, well, that isn't going to cut that. Well, I'm sorry to say it will, because understand, when you're pulling on something, you got a great deal of tension, and you're pulling 6, 7 wires through a piece of conduit. That pressure against a little piece of metal is going to leave a scar. And when you go to meg that out, which you're going to learn later, how to meg stuff out, that may arc against this. And if it does, they're not going to pass you on the inspection. So take the time to do it right the first time. You never get a call back. You never have to waste time nor money, and you save your job. All right? So what I showed you on the 90, using the tools, you're going to do that with each piece. So when you bring up your pieces to be evaluated, I'm going to look to be sure it's been reamed, it's been cleaned, it's straight, and that when we set it on the floor, we know that there's 12 inches or pretty close. You got an 1/8 of an inch sparingly either way. But understand, be a perfectionist in this, because we are only discussing the basics. When you get into the upper classes, we're going to be very diligent on being exact. And you can look around in the classroom and you can see all the different angles that these people have done to put EMT together. Don't think that you can't do it. You can do it, you just need to be taught how to do it. And that's what we're here for. So there's my 90. The next thing we're going to build is known as a offset, or in some cases, some people call it a kick. We're going to show you how to do the offset and the kick at the same time. All right, welcome back. This time we're going to go and do the offset. Now, in your book, in your textbook, somewhere, because, you know, they update these things and we don't want to keep filming all the time, so it's in that textbook and it's your job to find it. The offset is designed to go over an item, whatever that item might be. It could be a gas pipe, it could be water lines, because nothing, when you get into construction, you, the electrician, probably will be behind everybody else. The plumbers will be in there, the ductwork guys, the HVAC people have all done their jobs. And now you're coming in and you have to work around them. Well, that's just part of the job, all right? And that's why knowing this will save you so much time and so much headache and hassles. It's unbelievable. You'll see your chart down here. Now, we're only going to discuss this briefly, but always remember where this material is at. I don't expect you to memorize this. I have not done this myself and memorized it, but I have a cheat book that if I'm out there doing it, I can quickly look it up. Your Uglies book also has the same concept. So use that. I don't have a problem here, you looking at the book and reading it. Matter of fact, I encourage it, all right? You got to comprehend this stuff, and you have to understand what these charts mean. Again, if you understand what they mean and how to find it and where to find it, your job is going to be so much easier on you. Remember, this is only a small part of electricians, but understand that you need to know this to save yourself money and time. You notice the different degrees across the top here. All right, that's fine. In our exercise, And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're saying we're using a 30-degree bend. It also, depending on what bend you're using, depends on how much room you have to move your conduit. You may have to do a very sharp, steep incline. Well, remember, the steeper the incline, the harder it's going to be to pull that wire in the end. So there's several factors that involve in this, and the book discusses that. The distance that you have to your object takes into play. The amount of materials, all right? You don't want to sit there and waste a lot of material. So we're using 30-degree bend. We want down here, I think it calls for a 3-inch rise. Now a rise is nothing more than the distance from the bottom of my pipe or my object to the top of my object and to the bottom of my pipe. All right? That's the rise. Now if you want to fudge that and put another 1/2 inch, that's great. But in the classroom, you're going to work with 3 inches. Now, you come down here to 3 inches. We're going to work with 30-degree bend. You want to come across and you're going to see the bend distance between the two bends, in this case, is 6 inches. Remember I told you don't worry about shrinkage? Well, you're not going to worry about it in this exercise. But later on in other courses, you're going to need to know what that shrinkage means. Down here it tells you approximately the correct shrinkage. In this case, it's 3/4 of an inch. What do we mean by that? Well, as you make these bends, that pipe metal is being lost. There's a percentage of distance on that pipe that's being lost because of the bends. In this case, if this was our offset depth of 3 inches and we were bending 30-degree angles here, then the distance between my two marks is 6 inches, but I have to add 3/4 of an inch because when I go to do that and make those bends, it's going to take up that extra 3/4 of an inch. And then if my object is right here, I'm on target. Now, I'm going to tell you from personal experience that when you go to do this at first, you're going to fudge a couple inches on here because you're going to make mistakes. Until you fully understand how to do this, it's going to take a little bit of time and effort. But if this is used, like if I have an electrical box here and I'm running this up and I have a pipe, a water pipe or something, or a piece of ductwork that I got to go over, and then I'm connecting it to maybe another connector, or I'm connecting it to another electrical box. That's where the shrinkage comes into play critically. But for our training purposes, we are only trying to learn how to use the tool and understand how these charts work. So in that case, I want you to follow the instructions that have been given to you in your lab exercises. We're using, again, 1/2 inch conduit. You're going to have a 3-inch rise, to my best of my knowledge, if we haven't changed it. And you're going to use 30-degree angles. All right. So knowing all of this, and to save materials, we want to measure out, oh, I don't know, let's just say 4 inches. What did I show you before? Make complete circles, 360-degree circles here. All right. My book says for 3-inch rise, I need 6 inches between bends. I go to my first mark, I add 6 inches. I again make a complete 360 circle on my pipe. And I'm ready to go. Now, remember, I told you you could do this on the floor or standing up. In this mode, in this part of the exercise, I'm going to do it standing up because it's just a little bit easier. So what I want you to do is be sure you got your glasses on. Put your gloves back on. Grab your tool and your pipe. Now, this gets to be a little coordination test here on your part. But now, instead of doing it on the floor, I'm up here in the air. Now, remember the safety factor. Don't be winging this thing around. You're going to hit somebody. Somebody's not paying attention in here. All right? So be sure your area is safe to work in. Now I'm standing my tool up on its end. And you notice how I turn to an angle and I mount my foot against this. All right? This is for safety so it doesn't slide out and slip and bust me in the face. Don't worry, that'll happen also one day. So now, again, we're going back and we're sliding the pipe into the front of the handle here. Now remember, you see your arrowhead, all right? You want to line that up. And there's an arrowhead on both sides, all right? Now you notice that I have this with a little bit of pressure and the tool is fine, okay? But again, remember, if you want to keep it adjusted right, find your line, all right? Oh, there it is. You see that very, very light line with the wording? Right along here. You'll see it when you see it up on the pipe itself. But that's a guide for yourself so that you know that you're parallel and you're straight. So now, before I go make my first bend, I want to double check and be sure that I don't have any slippage. All right? I'm back where I'm at. I have a light amount of pressure on it. I double check to be sure that my line is straight. And I tilt my tool forward. Now, remember, I'm using 30 degrees. All right? I do not want to pull this bar all the way down to that line. I want to pull this bar so it's parallel to my 30-degree mark. You got to smoothly pull it until your bar is parallel. Just about like that. All right? Nothing drastic. You notice that I used my upper body and all the leverage on this pipe. I wasn't right here, all right? And I had a good angle on my bar. If you don't and you're up here, this thing is going to slip out on you, all right? And you're going to do a face plant on the concrete, all right? So be sure that you get it where you're comfortable and you have a good grip on it and you've watched where there's nobody walking around you and you pull down on it where you want it. Now, a key to this is once you're done, lift off the pipe so there's no pressure on it, and you're going to slide it continuously through the tool, but now rotate it 180 degrees. Now, I go again and line up my second line to my arrow, but now I also need to ensure that my line is parallel and straight on with my tool. Again, I pick up the stance where my foot is back here, holding the bar so it doesn't slide. And now I gently, evenly apply pressure and watching it. And I tweak it a little bit to about what I think is 30-degree angle. Once that's done, you release it, grab a hold of your tool, put it in a safe place. Now, you lay it down and you're looking at it and you're going, it's off a little bit. That's okay, but I haven't overbent it. So now I can do what is known as a tweaking, okay? In this case, I'm looking at this and I'm sitting there saying, hey, look, I may have been off a little bit. That's all right. Don't panic. It's perfectly natural sometimes until you understand what you're doing. So you got to know that now I got to put it back into my tool and I have to rebend it just so little so that this end's going to come down. No problem. We pick up our tool again. We come back. We want to line up our arrows. Be sure everything's straight. And I tweak it a little bit. You notice? I just tweaked it a little bit. I didn't force it. Now, I can sit there and look at it, and I got a gentle slope, my 30-degree angles. You notice I don't have any tweaking here as far as twists or bends. And that was caused because I was gentle with it. I pulled the material through and I gently brought it down. If you try to do it too fast, you may have these little ripples. If you have the ripples, you got to do it again. So now we want to see where we at on our work here. And you notice that there's my 3 inches. Okay? It's actually on a flat surface, it comes out better, but all right? But there's my 3 inches. Remember I told you if you want to fudge it and put it up a ½ an inch higher, that's great, but not in the classroom. I need to know, I have to have a standard so I can evaluate you. All right? That's what you're looking for, because remember, by NEC code, this has got to be strapped within 6 inches of the curve here. So it's going to be mounted here, and then after the curve, 6 inches. All right? So therefore, you're going to be securing this, and it's going to be well locked down. All right? Again, now we have our offset. All right? Again, we're going to put this in the pipe vise. Secure it, but don't bend it. Pick up our hacksaw. Check nobody's destroyed it lately or put the blade on backwards. And cut as close to the corner as you can get it there. Now, you notice how smooth I'm moving this. If you're doing a real chop operation, you're putting too much pressure on it. Lighten up on it. Now, I'm done, correct? Wrong. Reaming both ends that I cut. Ream it. And you always want to try to get it pointing down if you can, just because if there's any material in there, it'll come out. Again, rotate your pliers or your channel locks around it, whatever makes you happy. Again, the other end. This is all part of the evaluation, so if you don't do it, you don't pass. Get it on there, be sure all your burrs are gone, out of the way. All right. Put your name on both pieces so that we don't get confused here, and we know that you've accomplished that task. All right? Now we're going to go to the saddle bend. Pay attention, because if you don't use the tool right, you will never get this bend correct. Welcome back. I hope that your first 2 projects worked out well for you. If not, let us know and we'll assist you redoing those and helping you out. You may not understand something, you may lost something in the translation. Let us know and we'll help you out. The final bend that you're going to do is a saddle bend. Saddle bend is typically used for, again, going over an object. But this time, just like you see in your textbook, and again, I don't want to tell you the page because each textbook sometimes changes, but this is basically what you're going to build. I've given you the dimensions on this so that you can follow along. Now, we're going to try to make this as easy as possible. Don't get all involved with the shrinkage and the take-up and all that. What we're worried about is understanding how to use the tool, because without knowing how to use the tool, and there are special circumstances in this, if you don't use the proper location, it'll never come out right. What you should have left is approximately about 4 or 5 feet of pipe on your exercise. What we're going to do here is we're going to find the center point of this pipe. Now, the reason we do this is basically the bottom line is it's easier for the student right now. Trying to bend the conduit with only 4 or 5 inches back here is extremely difficult. I even have a problem with it sometimes. So this is one of those situations where if you have to do a saddle, you might want to use a little extra material. You know what I'm talking about? So in our case, you're going to use whatever's left of your pipe. Now, what you want to do is you want to first, of course, measure your pipe. And in this case, am I lucky or not? It's 5 feet long. So half of 5 feet is 2.5 feet. So therefore, we got our 2 feet plus 6 inches makes it 30 inches. That's the center of my pipe. Your pipe might come out different. So what I want to do is mark the 360 all the way around. Therefore, now I know that that's the middle of my pipe, and I'm going to work out to the outside edges of my pipe. In your book, I think it's showing 5 inches for the 2-inch rise, all right, in your depth, all right, where I think the exercise is calling for 2 inches. So the marks are 5 inches apart. So therefore, again, we're not worried about shrinkage, nothing else. We're just trying to learn how to use the tool correctly. So now I find my center mark, I put my tape measure up against that, and I want 5 inches this direction and 5 inches this direction. Again, I come back and I draw a complete 360s around here. Now, for some reason, and I'm not sure why this is, students have a real difficulty with this one. So what we want to do is put our safety equipment back on. Grab our tool. Now, remember our tool that has all these different degrees and arrows and stars and notches and everything? That's important to know, depending on what you're trying to get accomplished. As you read your textbook and as you watch the videos, you'll see, and they don't explain it real well, but I'm going to in this, you see this little notch? When you're holding your pipe, you'll see that notch up on top. That notch has to marry up with the middle line, your center point. That's the first bend that you're going to do, because as it shows in your book, it's a 45-degree angle. So we take our equipment, we come down, we slide the pipe through the tool. We're locating the center mark. That center mark has to go right at the notch. You cannot put it over at the arrow where 90% of the people try to do this. So therefore, double check to be sure that your line is marked up with your notch, not your arrowhead. Again, you're going to go down and we got to get our 45-degree bend. Again, this time I'm just feeling more comfortable with my right foot holding the peg than my left foot. That's just me. That's up to you. So again, I put a little pressure on it, recheck, be sure that I'm as close as I can possibly be, line up my tubing, and I gently come down on top of it and push down on my conduit until I'm parallel with my 45 degrees. That's pretty close there. All right? Now, I take it and I can either go straight through, which I prefer to do, but I have to bend or rotate this, rotate it 180 degrees. Now, when I do that, you want to verify that everything is parallel and straight. I want to recheck to be sure that my arrowhead is on my line. This is where it gets some confusing points here, because you're moving from the notch to the arrowhead now to bend the 30-degree angles. Excuse me, not the 30-degree angles, the 22.5-degree angles. Now you notice that this pipe only reads 22 degrees. I do not know the answer why they say 22.5 and the pipe is marked 22, but you're going to have to tweak it a little bit. So again, keeping it straight and parallel, watching out for other students, putting my pressure on my foot peg here so that the bar doesn't slide away. I gently bring it down so that it's almost at 22 degrees. You see that? Now I can take this out of from its tool, rotate it, put it back in the tool the opposite direction, and realign my next line, or my final line, with my arrowhead. There I have my arrowhead in place. Now I'm checking to be sure that everything's parallel and straight, lined up. Again, I switch just because this is what I feel is comfortable to me. And be sure that for safety reasons, you got one hand over the end of this pipe back at the top by your face, just in case this thing slips. The worst that you're going to get is a punch in the face, all right? But ensure that everything's parallel and straight, and again, slowly but evenly put pressure on it until you get down to 22.5 degrees or so. Pull it out of your tool, lay it on the table, and you'll notice that my line is dead center. All right? Now, you might have to tweak something. That's okay. Remember, tweaking is good. All right? Until you get really professional at it, it's going to happen. So don't freak on this. All right? People get all upset because of this thing happening. Oh, it isn't just perfect. Well, life isn't perfect either, folks. So you got to come back and you tweak it a little bit, and I've already showed you how to tweak. All right? This concludes this part of the exercise. Now, I'm holding you responsible to ensure that you've done everything that you have to do to your pipes, know your bends, understand the book. If you don't, please review this until you do, or then come and see one of us and we'll help you out. The last thing I want to show you is what is known as a kick. You don't need to do this, but you need to know it. All right, it isn't in your book. It doesn't go into great detail. But what I'm going to show you is, since you got the rest of your pipe here, and we know that we've already trimmed up our pipe, we cleaned it, we reamed it, so be sure that that's accomplished before you go turn in your work. What a kick is for is, have you ever been into, you can look around the classroom, and in some cases, you have your electrical box on the wall. And the pipe and the hole that goes into the box is out about 1 inch. So what we're going to do real quick is show you how to do a kick. There is no measurements for this. This is just eyeballing it. You're going to stick the pipe in there wherever you feel comfortable. All right? You're going to just bend a little bit. All right? What's a little bit? Whatever makes you happy. All right? You'll learn as you practice. Then you're going to rotate it 180 degrees, come down a couple inches, and you don't even have to make marks. Pull out your tool, and now you have a kick. All right? Understand that that kick is going to be attached to the wall or to your piece of equipment, whatever it might be. If your box is out here, it will depend on the thickness of your box. And you see how this will go into the knockout, and then it curves away, and then you're going to clamp it right here back to the wall. That's what a kick is. All right? So practice that on both ends just to understand how to do it. Again, I hope you learned something. We're here to help you out, and be sure that you use safety at all times. And finally, come on out, practice it, see what you can do. Thank you.